Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg. And I am delighted on this edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan to be chatting with the fabulous Sue Greentree. Sue, welcome and thank you for taking the time.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. Very exciting.
Good. Well, we have a lot to cover. And as you know, one of my passions about working on 911 is the women and men under the headset.
Yeah.
So I often say that 3 people have died in my district when 911 failed. And so for the last 7 years, I've been working on this, and you've been a wonderful partner, and so have others around the state.
Thank you.
So 35 years, you were one of those courageous folks, usually invisible, taking people's emergency calls. Tell me first how you decided to start getting into the field. It's a hard job. Why'd you pick it?
Yeah, it was 1984. And I originally thought that I would like to be a police officer. And I thought, well, to get in, it might be a good idea. They're hiring, they're getting ready to implement 911. I'll get into communications, and that would give me maybe a foot in the door. As you can imagine, back then it was more difficult for females to
Sure.
get into the academy. So in any event, I joined it, and I loved the job. And I decided I didn't want to be a police officer. I wanted to stay right there with 911. And that went on for 35 years.
That's incredible. And you were in Anne Arundel County. Give us a sense of the kind of calls you took.
Well, I mean, really everything. I was on the police side. So that Anne Arundel County has basically 2 centers. The main center is the police side. I was there for 26 years, and then the fire side for the last 9. And anything from, crime, burglaries, car accidents, suicides. Of course, the last several years, an extraordinary amount of overdoses with the opium epidemic that we're suffering. It's just the fire side. Of course, you have fires. Sometimes people are trapped. Sometimes, it's a lot of medical calls. I found actually the fire side to be more difficult because there were more calls on the fire department side that were emotional.
Yes.
As you could imagine, it was on the police side, you have the police activity, and then there are emotions there too.
Sure.
But on the fire side, the vast majority of the calls are really medical, and that really starts to get to you.
Sure. So let's talk about mental health, because getting to you, I mean, I think some of our courageous 911 specialists, as we renamed them in law in Maryland, are just underappreciated, and we don't take good enough care of them. The job is incredibly stressful. Tell me how you took care of your own behavioral health, mental health, and what you saw in your colleagues.
I think for many years you just try to make yourself somewhat immune to it, which is not always easy. But it's that over time that it really gets to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really start to realize how it's gotten to you until you're several years in. I did things. I mean, I started a family, and I had my kids, and my kids have been such a joy, and that was a big stress reliever. There were a couple of times during my tenure when I sought help with a counselor to discuss some of the things that I was hearing and how they were affecting me. And ultimately, I think that was one of the big things that made me decide I needed to retire, was the calls. I couldn't compartmentalize it any longer. And I found myself getting, finding more calls coming in that made me think of my family and aging. And, I answered a call for my father having a burst appendix, a call when somebody called in for my husband, who they saw in a parking lot looking like he was in extraordinary pain. They thought he was having a heart attack. What he had was a dislocated shoulder, things like that. When my father-in-law had a heart attack, I was working and somebody came up and asked me, could this be your father-in-law? And I said, yeah. So those things, but even things that are not family related, you can't turn off the human side of you when somebody is calling you and a terrible thing is going on in their lives. They found their child hanging.
Right.
I know one call that I had, there was a woman who came home from work and she found her teenage daughter hanging in her closet, and she, we got them started, the help started, and I'm talking to her and I'm telling her, she didn't know if her daughter was deceased yet. She couldn't tell. So I'm like, okay, you need to try to get her down. I'm trying to coach her as to how to get her down off of, can she cut it down? She said, I can't reach it. Then you just need to grab her legs. You need to hold her up. And the whole time that the fire department and the police are on their way, she's saying, I can't hold her anymore. I can't hold her anymore. And I'm like, you can, you're a mom, and moms, we can do this. You can hold her. And they got there, and in this instance, there was a happy ending. Her daughter was in, I know it's shocking, her daughter was in very grave condition, but they did get a pulse. They took her up to Baltimore, which was, this was not, that wouldn't have been the closest hospital. They took her up to a shock trauma unit, and she's my daughter's age. And so at the time, my daughter knew her and said, she went through months of rehab, but she recovered, which is remarkable.
Wow.
And as stressful and awful as that was a call to take, I know that my talking to her through that and telling her, you can hold her up. Just, I can't hold her. Yes, you can. I know that girl is alive.
Did you ever meet the mom?
I did not. Now, one of the things that I found, and I hear this across the board with 911 specialists, is we very often do not find out what happened in the end.
Yes.
Police officers, they go through the whole thing.
Yep.
For firefighters, but we don't know what happens. So I would occasionally call one and say, hey, what was the resolution on that?
Yeah.
But you don't want to do that all the time. They're busy.
Wow. So that was one of the earliest things I remember learning that really astonished me. The whole idea that police officers catch the bad guy and firefighters put out the fire and save the house, save the puppy inside and all that. Paramedics resuscitate grandma or a baby. But the folks under the headset don't know. And so they don't have that closure that they might have made a difference and saved a life as you did. That's an extraordinary story. Sue, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
And
so glad you
closure is
shared that.
important.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
So
So you were there when my friend and Senate colleague, Ed Riley from Anne Arundel County, toured the 911 center, the public safety answering point in Anne Arundel County.
Yeah.
What is it that you think that most legislators or decision makers don't understand about your job?
I think they don't understand that, first of all, it seems whenever somebody comes into tour, the phones get deadly quiet. I don't know why that is.
We know that's not always the case, for sure.
But no, but the call volume, and that the moment you get off the phone and the next one's ringing, there's no breather. So it's hard to understand on a tour that may last a few minutes, that you're taking call after call after call, and some may be routine, but then there's the one that's not routine, and you get off of that call and you are immediately, another 911 is ringing, and you are picking that one up and you're handling that one.
So I think it's the whole idea of you never know what you're getting.
And you don't.
So it could be, so I say, you don't know if it's, I was just raped, or my house is on fire, or there's a
Right,
bad guy who just burglarized my home or whatever, or if it's my puppy is in a tree, or can you help me with
right,
my math homework?
right.
So
Or if it's a call where the person is not really able to talk to
yeah,
you, and be you need to have those skills and be able to walk them through something. Are you not able to speak because somebody is there, or they may answer a question that makes no sense, and you have to realize that they answered that in a nonsensical way.
sure.
Something may be happening there.
Yes, medium size
um
with pepperoni. Excuse me?
yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, the calls are not only constant, a lot of the time, but also the hours
Yes.
that as operators and all that specialists, we're working the same 24/7, all the holidays. I cannot tell you how many
Mhm.
uh, Christmases and Easters and whatever kids' games I missed.
Yeah,
I understood the job and I respected that, but it didn't make it any easier necessarily to miss all that time with your family.
of course.
Um, and so, it's to not have that recognition for the constraints of the job, let alone the stress of the job and how it builds in within you.
Yes, of course. So let's go back. So you were courageous and smart to ask for help. What was the culture? I mean, so first off, was that offered by your 911 center, by the county? Was there a burden with trying to get access and get it paid for? Talk about that process and whether you think others avail themselves of that opportunity.
Um, EAP is available. I did
EAP,
not.
Employee Assistance
Oh,
Plan.
yes, employee assistance program, yes. I did not do that. I used my health insurance and I made an appointment,
Okay.
a couple appointments,
Yeah.
and went for, a month or so just to discuss.
Yep.
Like I said, at different junctures, there would be something that would affect you in such a way that you needed to talk through it. But no, I did it on my own.
So did you happen to see the 911 show that lasted a season? And I don't know if it's coming back this fall, but they were capturing some of the examples of the calls that 911 specialists would take. Did you think, if you watched it, did you think that was accurate?
I did watch one episode. So there's a guy here at work who, he's an ex-police officer, but he's a cyber guy now. Anyhow, he said to me, "This show is coming on. I want you to watch it and tell me if that's what it's like."
Yes.
And I watched it, and I did feel that show. They were in New Orleans and Alaska, I
Yeah.
believe,
Yeah.
and I did feel that show was actually quite authentic.
Yeah.
But to tell you the truth, I only watched one episode. I said to Paul when I told him about it, I said, I watched it, but I started crying at one point.
Yeah.
And I said, I realized that it was bringing back to me, it was that post traumatic.
Right.
It was bringing back to me calls that I had taken, and I couldn't watch the whole show. And I decided every episode may not do that, but I'm not going to watch it again because it's not good for me.
Understood. No, that makes total sense. I tried to put it out on social media to really encourage folks to watch because I think people don't understand.
They
I
don't.
always say that the only time people hear about and I always say the courageous women and men under the headset, the only time they hear about them is when someone dies, when there's an error
Right.
made.
Right.
And that's not fair because millions of calls get handled correctly, quickly, appropriately,
All the time.
compassionately, and that's
Yes.
not what people
And
think that.
and by and large, there's very little recognition
Oh yeah.
for, I mean, that girl that was found hanging, I never heard anything from anybody in my agency about it.
Mm, mm,
Um, one of the on this, so this would have been well into my career, but on the fire department side, um, one of the first calls that I took there
wow.
was a dad who walked into his toddler's bedroom
Mhm.
and found his child with the cord from blinds. The child had awakened and got wrapped around his neck, and he was not breathing.
Right.
And he got the cord undone, and I started CPR instructions with him, and the child started to get the color back as the medics were arriving.
Good.
And again, I never heard anything at work for that, but that is getting better.
Yeah.
I do think within the last couple of years, we've started to see more recognitions within the agencies
Yeah.
for these jobs. I know the fire department had Anne Arundel implemented, if you had a save, meaning you had somebody who had a cardiac arrest and you did CPR and you had a save, you got a heart on the wall. If you delivered a baby, you
Nice.
got a stork on the wall.
Aw.
And that, that kind of recognition is all people want.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's tell me you appreciate what I did.
Well, let's start with what we've done in Maryland. So we've now passed 11 laws
Yes.
related to Next Gen 911, and you've been
Thank you. You know, you're my hero.
Thank you, dear. I appreciate it. So starting with just what the job is called. So calling them telephone operators or
Right.
telecommunicators even.
Clerks when I started.
Clerks, holy cripes. So there's a perception of all they do is answer the phone. Their biggest risk is getting a paper cut. I have heard someone say that, which is so offensive. So we renamed the job in law as 911 specialists, and they are called, first responders are police, fire, and paramedics, but these are the first responders, because unless we get a trained, competent person under the headset who's dispatching police, fire, and paramedics first, then the fire isn't put out, the bad guy isn't caught, and grandma isn't resuscitated. It's the way I always talk about it. So sometimes it's the symbol, right, of even just the title of your job.
Right. And the job has become so much more complicated than when I started, because it's not just the volume of calls, the variety of calls. There are, police, fire, medical protocols that we're trained in and certified.
Yep.
You have to be certified to be an emergency telecommunicator.
Yep.
And then you get certified in CPR, and then you get certified in all these, and you have to maintain those certifications and all the technology that we're using, which is great. It's great technology. When I started, we did not have 911 in Anne Arundel County. You picked up a phone and you wrote on an index card and punched it in a time clock. So that we have phase 1, 2, wireless and GIS and all that is amazing.
Geographic information system, which helps the 911 folks locate the place of the emergency. Yes.
And that your cell phone will tell us exactly where you are, and all those things are amazing.
Which it doesn't. As you know, the cell phone generally gives you the cell tower information, but not the precise location. And people have died when they have gotten
that absolutely has happened.
Yes.
It is much better now.
Yes.
I mean, but there are still failures at times.
100%.
I think one of the big failures is going to be when you have what we're going to call a non-dispatchable location. Maybe you're out at a large park or some trails or things like that. And so there's an address for this location, but it's acres and acres and acres.
Right.
And so there need to be more precise locations.
And that's something we're working on. And the geographic information system experts are really, they're a critical part of this equation of public safety.
Yes.
And as you probably remember, Fitz Thomas, a 15-year-old beautiful teenager, drowned when people couldn't locate him, and went back and forth between Montgomery County and Loudoun County. Whose job is it to dispatch folks and try to save him? And so talk a little more about the training, because what I've always been told is that after someone has been hired or recruited, that it takes 8 to 12 months before they can be under the headset independently
Yeah.
without supervision. Talk about what that period of time is like.
Okay. So you start out, the first thing you're going to go to, you're going to take your 40-hour emergency telecommunicator course, and then there's classroom training in Anne Arundel County. That classroom training is about 5 or 6 weeks long now. Different agencies have different length, but that's a good standard, I would say, is anywhere between 6 to maybe 10 weeks of classroom training. Then you go down into the 911 center and you're assigned to a certified trainer who you sit with side by side. And they'll start you with taking at administrative calls only. So you're not touching 911, you're not touching 10-digit emergency.
Right.
And then they go on to the emergency lines, the 10-digit ones, which are for like alarm companies and things.
Right.
And then you start taking 911 calls. And when you master that, you move to the radios. And there's a lot, it's just hours and hours and hours of training, because until we can be 100% certain that you are proficient and you can operate on your own, and then you can't let somebody
Right.
answer calls or be in charge of safety of the firefighters and the police officers.
Right. Right. So after all that, so it's not just recruitment that's a challenge, because not a
No.
very tiny fraction of people are going to be
No.
good at this job, but it's also retention, whether it's salary, benefits, or just the brutal stress. Why don't you talk about where do people leave? Where do they go when people don't stick around for 35 years as you did?
Yeah. There are some people that don't even make it through training. They realize not long in that this is not going to be for them. The stress is too much. And so they bail, I shouldn't say bail. They leave for good reason, and it was the best for them.
Yeah.
And then, but honestly, if there had been an alternative for me,
Yes.
like I know you're looking at 311 in Maryland, which is very needed.
Isn't that exciting? Yeah.
If there had been an alternative,
yes,
I don't think I would have retired when I did.
Yeah. So for someone who's watching now, so 311 is a non-emergency government service information number. It's only in 6 counties currently around the state. And so I had legislation that the commission, the 911 commission that I chair, has endorsed, and that would make 311 statewide, which I'm really excited about.
I think it would
it'll
be
lighten the
great
load on 911 centers and take folks like Sue Greentree and offer her an alternative to retirement. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So,
let's pivot for a second, because we're going to wrap up sometime soon. Text to 911. I always say, and you've heard me say this a million times, that in Maryland, I wanted all boats to rise together. So I didn't want wealthier or larger counties to move to next generation 911 or implement new technology before smaller or less affluent counties or anything like that. So text to 911, August 20th, the entire state went live, text to 911 in 2020. So do you have any thoughts as to the risks and benefits, advantages, disadvantages of that?
Well, first of all, the logo is always call if you can, text if you can't.
Yes.
Because, it is important that the information, here's one thing I think people definitely need to know. A lot of people, when they call in, ask, why are you asking me these questions?
I think put on this background. So I'm changing it now in the middle of our conversation. Yes.
I think that callers need to understand that the questions are so we can get you the best help.
Yes.
Not just somebody coming. And then the moment the address is received and just the instant of what is happening, heart attack, whatever.
Right.
Help is being dispatched.
Yes.
They are being dispatched. The questions are for supplemental to give the responders the best information they can have when they get there.
Yes.
People need to understand that it's necessary.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And with text, you don't have all that information. You
don't. And so that's what you could be missing, trying to get all of that information in texting.
Yes.
I do think that it is a great resource, and there are a lot of people, first of all, the deaf may wish to call in and use text.
Mhm. Oh,
And,
yeah.
some people, they can't, let's say you have Parkinson's, a lot of times your voice starts to go away and it's
Yes.
very, very soft. So, or you
Well, you
can't
can't
speak.
speak because you're
You
hiding
can't
in the
speak.
closet and there's a bad guy in your home, or yeah.
Exactly. And so you should text. You should text then, and you can get the help that you need.
No question. So I still have a million questions, but I do want to start wrapping up. You're on the 911 board, in
Yes,
addition
I
to
am.
now the 911 commission. Why don't you
Yep.
talk briefly to folks who don't understand what each of them do and all that, sort of the relative roles, and why you think it's important that you are serving now on both of those entities?
Okay. Well, I'm on the 911 board as the APCO, which is Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. I am their representative. So the board is made up of different representatives. There could be fire department, police department, government, the GIS, geographical information, there's telco, there's several different positions, and everybody has their area of expertise. And so that is why, as the board altogether, we make decisions on funding would be one of the main functions. There's a monthly meeting, and 911 centers come with funding requests for projects in the 911 center that relate directly to 911, to the phone system. And some of that is expanded now under some of the new legislation that you have created, which is great.
Thank you.
So anyhow,
It's a big deal. So
yeah,
I feel like I want to do a bit of an educational thing on this, but I really want this to be about you. But less than 40% of the costs of our 911 center were
yes,
covered by the 911 fees. And so the burden on the county
yes,
was enormous. And
yes.
so we've made a lot of shifts to help it
Absolutely.
be better. So,
Absolutely. And for those rural counties,
oh,
it is often much less than that. So this is
yes.
so important
Uh,
for everybody, but really for them.
uh-huh.
So anyhow, and then there are committees on the board. I sit on the Policy and Standards Committee
Hmm.
within the board. And so, like, currently, one of the things that we're working on is the PSAP interruption of service. If your 911 lines go down, we're working
Outages.
with
We've been,
Northern Virginia and DC and all the telco companies for a consistent notification process.
yep. So my
People need to
orders,
know if 911's not working in their area.
exactly right. So telco is telecommunications
Yes,
companies.
yeah. So your
And
AT&Ts
yeah,
and all of those.
yep, exactly. All right. So if someone is interested in doing this critically important but brutally challenging job, how would you suggest they get started, and what should they be thinking about to see if it's the right fit?
Um, well, aside from the actual skills that you're going to learn, you need to be prepared to work anytime, any day, any hours,
Yes.
obviously, and long hours, and held over mandatory overtime.
Mhm.
Aside from that, I think that just about every agency is hiring because they do have terrible shortage issues. There is I wish I could think of the name. There is software, a testing you have to take
Mhm.
now,
Mhm.
and it shows your ability to do mapping and a lot of decision making and memorization and all of that,
Well, it's
and
multitasking. You've got to be able to
all
type
that
and listen. And
multitasking.
yeah,
And I think that they should Google that software
interesting.
and practice it,
Yeah,
because it is not an easy exam to pass.
yeah.
And then talk to people. You can call any center and say, I'd like to come in. I'm thinking of this job. Is there a time I can come and sit in with a telecommunicator or a 911 specialist
Yep.
and see if I think this is the job for me? And
Yep.
I think just about any center would
Welcome
welcome
that.
that.
I agree with you. Yeah. I have done a sit along and
Uh-huh.
watch folks, and sometimes it's boring and you're just sitting there chatting, but then there are the moments that it's totally not.
That's
So,
correct.
all
That's
right.
correct.
So Sue, thank you. Before we shift to the Fast Five, let me give you 30 seconds to give a commercial for Secular, since that is the logo behind you. And
Oh,
Secular
okay.
is part of the commission's work as well.
Thank you. So I currently work for Secular Solutions, and it is a cybersecurity company that focuses on 911. We have, we do monitoring and reporting of your critical networks, and very exciting, we have a DHS project going on right now.
DHS, Department of Homeland Security.
Department of Homeland Security project going on right now. I'm sorry, in the acronym world.
That's right.
And we're monitoring the networks, and we have a new a new piece of equipment that's going to be called Bulwark that comes out that has machine learning.
Okay.
And so that device, we have our Paladin, which is the name of our monitoring piece right now, on certain agencies, and it's gathering data, and it'll be fed into Bulwark, and Bulwark is a really exciting up and coming.
Okay.
So we also do incident response.
Wait. I'm gonna
and training.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up. So folks can learn more about Secular Solutions on their website, but
Absolutely.
But I can say that we didn't talk about it on this conversation, but technology and cybersecurity is a critical part of upgrading our 911 systems.
Yes.
Because if a bad guy hacks into your system and shuts down your 911 center, then your house burns down, grandma dies, the bad guy gets away, like all bad things happen. So
all those bad things can happen.
Okay. So thank you for that and continuing your service to keeping our community safe. So Sue Greentree, Fast Five, so that folks can learn a little bit more about you. So
Okay.
Question number one, and these are just super quick. What is your favorite kind of cuisine?
Italian.
Okay. After the pandemic, and whenever that is, but it's getting closer, and I hope everybody's getting vaccinated. When you could pick any destination to travel, where would you want to go?
June 24th of next year, my husband and I are going to Ireland and Scotland for 11 days.
Fantastic. That's great. Okay. During the pandemic, what do you miss most? What have you missed most?
Seeing my friends that don't live close by. My childhood friends who we always get together have not been able to.
Yeah, definitely. If there was a movie being made about your life, who would you want to star as you?
Susan Sarandon.
Cool. That's a good choice. Okay. So the last question, the one that I ask everyone, Sue Greentree, what is your hidden secret superpower? What is something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Okay. I don't know if I'd call it a superpower. It's just sort of a way that I try to live my life. And it is optimism, being positive. And that is certainly in my career, that's not always been easy in a 911 job, but I've always tried to do that and be cheerful and positive. I actually had a chief say to me in the hallway one day, Sue, are you always happy? And he meant it in the best way, but I took it as a big compliment. Yeah. And so in a tough environment, I just want to make a difference, and I want that difference to be that somebody feels a little bit better.
I love that. Well, Sue, thank you for your 35 years of service in public safety. Thank you for the commitment that you have to keeping our community safe, to saving lives, and for everything you do, and for serving on the 911 Commission and the 911 Board. It has been such a pleasure to kibitz with you today. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you so much for everything you're doing. You are, without question, done more for 911 and the people sitting under the headset than anybody I have ever known. And I, like I said, you're my hero. So thank you.
I have to say, I don't know if it's going to show up, but in addition to my senator pin, I am wearing my 911
your little 911 headset. Very good.
and I wear them both. And so I'm
Wow.
thinking of you guys. You're near my heart. And so,
Well,
yeah, thank you.
thank you. It really, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Lots of people do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, stay safe. I look forward to seeing you in person before too long.
Yeah,
Take care.
absolutely. Bye-bye.